Hi, I'm Tristan from StepBackHistory.com for the Armchair Historian. As I mentioned in the previous episode in the series on YouTube, we're getting into an all-new expansion to history called the Islamic Golden Age. Now, I covered the lore in my previous video. How did this come about, what caused it, and how it ended. But today we're going to go into the patch notes and see just how much the Islamic Golden Age contributed to the advancement of the arts and sciences in a relatively short period between the ascension of the Islamic Empire and its decline at the hands of the Mongol horde. First, let's talk about Muslim theology. Islam is a very scholarly religion, with debates over theology playing a significant role in how many Muslims approach philosophy.
Especially if, like me, you harbor a secret burning desire to the Queen.
Science and outside ideas. A struggle between two philosophies defines the Golden Age. The dominant one before the 900s was the Mu'tazila school. The idea behind it was that with God being an all-powerful creature of justice and reason, then evil in the world must then be the result of human free will and the abandonment of reason. This reasoning meant that, aside from scripture, logic and reason could be employed to determine right from wrong. This encouraged philosophy and development of a reasoned approach to matters of justice and defining a good life. This idea conflicted with the al-Hadith movement led by the ascetic theologian by the name of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Followers believed that designated scriptures, the Quran, and a collection of reported sayings from the Prophet Muhammad known as the Hadiths, were the only viable sources of guidance on matters to do with morality. The two debated back and forth, with a few caliphs more or less defending the Mu'tazilites, but unable to influence the scholarship in a meaningful way. Only peace came when a different theologian named al-Ash'ari used the rational methods of the Mu'tazilites to defend the main arguments of the al-Hadith movement. This essentially married the two in a sort of compromise. Both al-Ash'ari and a rival compromise defined by Abu Mansur al-Maturidi became the dominant theological schools from there onwards, at least in Sunni Islam. Shia was its own thing entirely. This look at the theology, of course, is defined by massive developments and growth in philosophy.
The Queen.
As the Islamic Empire conquered territory held by the Greek-speaking Byzantine Empire, with it came, well, a bunch of Greek people. Quickly, the works of the toged mainstays of the likes of Aristotle and Plato were enormous inspiration for reams of commentary and development. They meshed these Greek ideas with their Islamic ideas with notable thinkers like Al-Farabi, Avicenna, and Al-Kindi. The reason Europeans knew about Aristotle and Plato was because of the transmission of these ideas from those in the Islamic Empire to Europe via trade routes. The first significant boom of Islamic philosophy studying the Greeks began a decline after the first major philosopher of the Golden Age, Averroes or Ibn Rushd, around the time the Golden Age was ending. That compromise I mentioned a little earlier came about because of the philosophical idea of the dialectic, the coming together of two at-odds ideas in an attempt to find the correct answer, or a third answer, a synthesis, which melds the two together. The idea that theology can develop via discourse and philosophy is called kalam, and was used to debate literalism versus rationalism, free will versus fatalism, and any other significant discussion in the field of Islamic philosophy. So much so, kalam, as today, is merely the word for theology. So, we have the Islamic origin for the basis of knowledge covered, discussing ideas from a core of theology and philosophy, moving upwards into mathematics. See, it's almost as if I ordered these intentionally. So Islamic developments in math are massive, and much like philosophy, the secret sauce is taking ideas from vastly different cultures, developing those, and spreading them out to other places. The term algorithm comes from the name of its creator, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, who at the same time was the father of algebra, an Arabic term for reuniting the broken parts. From India, the Arabic numeral system developed, which made place columns possible, significantly advancing mathematics. They also borrowed and developed the concept of the number zero. Places like Europe with Roman numerals needed to adapt to the much superior number system quickly. Muslim mathematicians developed the field of geometry considerably, making this beautiful artwork possible. Ibn Mudad al-Jayani developed the law of sines, which is the basis for modern trigonometry, And lastly, Hassan ibn al-Haytham is credited for producing some of the earliest methods for finding the volume of a paraboloid, some of the most influential movements towards calculus. There's a lot more, from irrational and negative numbers to cubic equations, but honestly, the math confuses me greatly, and I think deep diving into Islamic math is for a different historian. Alright, now we can get into the sciences! No better place to start than the scientific method, right? Scientists like our friend from the last paragraph, al-Haytham, are responsible for significant advances in scientific methodology. Al-Haytham himself gets the title of the world's first true scientist because of groundbreaking developments in the process of experimentation. This approach flourished in areas like medicine, where the testing of drugs could happen systematically, and the importance of using controls in medical experiments became a thing. Now, let's mosey on over to astronomy. The nature of space was essential, and between finding the right place to face during prayer and astrology, Islamic scholars were able to learn a lot about the cosmos. One Muslim scholar, al-Battani, determined the accurate length of a solar year, which later astronomers used to track the movements of the sun, moon, and planets, eventually even inspiring Copernicus, who determined the sun was the center of the solar system. Alchemists trying to turn lead into gold, inspired by Aristotle I might add, including Ibn Hayyan, discovered processes which moved forward into modern chemistry like distillation, reduction, and sublimation. In biology, the Islamic world went through an agricultural revolution. A book made by Muslim botanist Ibn Basal gave detailed description of useful plants and how to grow and care for them. Other botanists categorized multiple volumes of plant species and wrote massive tomes collecting and developing the knowledge of agriculture, finding the best methods, and disseminating them around to make a boom in food production. When it came to animals, Islamic scholars translated and retained the knowledge of Aristotle's book Zoology. A lot of Muslim scholars published categorizations of animals, their history, and their parts, and some even discussed a concept known as the struggle for existence, which modern historians liken to very early thought on the process of evolution. In medicine, Muslim scholars developed on ancient physicians like Hippocrates and Galen, producing a much more sophisticated understanding of the human circulatory system, how eyes work, and how stomachs processed food. Medicines like cannabis and opium became part of the medical regime, as well as surgery introduced from the Hindus and developed. They even understood the importance of anesthesia and antiseptic measures for surgical procedures centuries ahead of their time. A lot also moved forward in the realm of physics. Physicists like Ibn Sina discussed concepts like air resistance and its application to the Aristotelian view of motion and momentum. Ibn Bajjah describes an early version of Newton's third law that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The field of optics moved forward with the studies of the properties of light and reflection. Not only did Islamic optics contribute to the understanding of the mechanics of the eye, but led to the first lenses and laws of refraction. Cartography also got a lot more sophisticated, and with the Islamic Empire connecting various parts of the world, you got some of the most impressive, reasonably accurate maps of the known world for the 12th century. Okay, now we can get to the part I wanted to talk about. I'm a technology historian, and I wanted to talk about inventions. There were a lot of them, and here are just a few of the funny or important ones. The alembic, which is a super important instrument in the process of distillation. You take two beakers and you connect them with a tube. It's useful in chemistry and in the next invention, which is alcohol distillation. Yep, for a religion that prohibits drinking, you can thank Islamic scientists for the magical process that gives you pretty much every hard liquor. Cinnabar, a critical ingredient in the refining of mercury, was discovered by a chemist by the name of Jabir ibn Hayyan. And while we're talking about chemicals, hydrochloric acid was first synthesized by the same dude. A couple of hundred years later, a Persian scholar named Razi distilled crude oil into kerosene for the first time, and also it's the first time for anybody for petroleum distillation. Maybe something they shouldn't have developed, what with our impending apocalypse and all. Damascus steel, the influence behind Valyrian steel in Game of Thrones, was more robust and stayed sharp longer than their regular steel counterparts. The musical instrument, the oud, became the forerunner of the European lute. Paper mills were first found in 8th century Baghdad, the first windmill was found in Islamic Persia, glass manufacturing was invented in the 9th century by Abbas ibn Firnas, the sugar mill, the syringe, the pinhole camera, double-entry bookkeeping, magnifying glasses, the guitar, the metronome, and even an automatic flute which was the first ever programmable machine. You can understand why that's such a big deal, right? Here's a big one for me. The scholar Ibn Khaldun is one of the founders of social science. His works are considered early forerunners of many, many different disciplines, including sociology, economics, demography, and historiography, or the study of historical methods. We don't often give Ibn Khaldun the reverence he deserves for massive contributions to our field, but here he is, centuries ago, pioneering fields that wouldn't fully ripen until the 19th century. Moving away from science and invention, the Islamic world also had an established system of hospitals beginning in the late 10th century. They were complete with different wards, and even were kept open 24 hours a day. The Golden Age Islamic world also had pharmacies and outpatient clinics, and were forbidden to turn people away who couldn't afford treatment. Paying for hospitals eventually turned into a sort of non-profit organization where even women physicians practice medicine. So, that was a lot. And yet, fairly often the credit for many other inventions is either avoided or given to Europeans who, quote-unquote, discovered the same process centuries later, usually in the Enlightenment or Renaissance, when all these ideas from the Islamic world made it to Europe in a big way. The credit for preserving the works of Greek writers and developing scientific principles rarely gets given to this period to these people. And in an age where it's becoming increasingly common to dismiss, malign, or even attack Muslims or Islamic culture, I think it's important to realize the Islamic world is one that is and has had marvelous beauty, fierce intelligence, and a lot of contributions to the world within it. Thank you.